What's going on, everybody? Trevor Noah here. Welcome to another episode of the Daily Social Distancing Show. It is now day 18 of staying at home to prevent the spread of coronavirus. And here's your quarantine tip of the day. I know these have been helping you live your life. If you crank up the thermostat high enough, just turn the temperature way up and then look directly into your light bulbs. It's basically like you're at the beach. You're welcome. Anyway, on tonight's episode, Dr. Fauci gets a security detail. We talk to Bill Gates about fighting coronavirus, and America has moved on from toilet paper, and now they're hoarding guns. So let's get into it. Welcome to the Daily Social Distancing Show.
From Trevor's couch in New York City to your couch somewhere in the world, this is the Daily Social Distancing Show with Trevor Noah.
Let's kick it off with some good news. Like everyone right now, scientists around the world are no longer thinking about anything other than the coronavirus. In fact, many scientists have dropped almost all other research and are only focusing on cures and treatments for COVID-19, which I think is great, because I think scientists were too busy working on random shit anyway. You know, there's always that one random scientist where you read a headline like, "New study says ducks can only live for 2 seconds in space." We didn't need to know that, Mr. Scientist. Who is even doing that experiment? How did you even get money for this? And scientists aren't just dropping other research. They've decided that they're going to be putting cooperation ahead of competition. And they're going to share research immediately rather than waiting like they normally do for months to publish their results and then get the credit for themselves, which makes perfect sense to me. This is not the time to worry about credit, right? And trying to get credit for stopping coronavirus is a waste of your time anyways. We all know President Trump is going to take the credit no matter what happens, so you might as well just relax. Be like, really, Trump? You did it? You're damn straight. How did you do it? I put the thing in the thing, and then boom, it disappeared. And some of this research is coming from an unlikely source. Yeah, one of the companies who has announced a possible breakthrough in vaccine developments is the cigarette giant British American Tobacco. Yeah, those guys. They claim that proteins extracted from tobacco plants could lead to a cure for coronavirus. And you know what? I'm not surprised. They spent years destroying people's lungs. Of course, they know what it's all about. Coronavirus is basically their competition. This is one of those, to catch a killer, you gotta be the killer. It's like the Hannibal Lecter of coronavirus. So scientists are teaming up. Tobacco companies are trying to do something good for a change. But in not so good news, there are now nearly 1 million coronavirus cases around the globe. The number keeps going up. And here in the US, yesterday's death toll was over 1,000, the highest yet. And those are not the only bad numbers. A record 6.6 million Americans filed for unemployment last week. Yeah, 6.6 million people filed for unemployment. And I know it can be hard to wrap your mind around numbers like that. But just look at this graph that came out showing the spike in job losses. You see that? Look at that spike. You've never seen anything like it. It looks like unemployment overdosed on Viagra and then got one of those 4-hour boners where you have to call a doctor. But you call the doctor after the 4 hours. Before that, you gotta use what you got. And that's not the only record being set right now. Over the past month, 3.7 million people have tried to buy guns. Yeah, the highest number the FBI has ever recorded. So during this pandemic, the two things people in America want the most are guns and toilet paper, which makes sense, because if I see someone carrying a gun, I shit myself. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know why stocking up on firearms is going to help you in the middle of a pandemic. If you want to protect yourself from outsiders, you don't need a gun, people. Think out of the box. You just need a recording of someone coughing on a loop. Yeah, you just play that in your house all night. Someone comes in the window, nah, I'm not messing with this house. Now, there is one person out there who actually does need more protection right now. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the man whose calm leadership during this crisis has won him the respect of all intelligent people and President Trump. And according to reports, Dr. Fauci has now been assigned a security detail because of threats that are being made against him, which is insane. Why would you threaten Dr. Fauci? And authorities aren't sure where the threats are coming from, but police have released a sketch of a potential suspect. And I don't know who it is because of the glasses, but that face looks familiar. Now, unfortunately, getting threats is fairly standard for anyone in the public eye. But what's not standard is that Dr. Fauci is also receiving lots of, quote, unwelcome communications from fervent admirers. Yes, that's a nice way to say that your groupies are crazy. And who would have thought one day we'd be living in a world where the whole planet would be grounded and an epidemiologist would be the hottest man on earth? People are just like, I gotta get me some of that Fauci. You know he got the vaccine, girl. He is the sexiest man on the planet. Who's sexier than Fauci? No one's sexier. If People magazine doesn't put him on the cover, they're wasting their lives. Now, as the corona cases continue to grow, more and more governors around America are announcing their own belated stay-at-home orders for their states. They're staggering them out. Yesterday, after weeks of resisting, the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, finally announced a lockdown for his state. And he did it on April Fool's Day. So Florida is officially locked down, which means Mickey Mouse and all of his friends will have to work from home, which I think is perfect for Donald Duck. That dude has never worn pants. He was born for the teleconferencing life. You think anybody's wearing pants? Are you wearing pants? You wear pants in your... I don't wear pants. I would stand up right now. But you're not ready. I'm also not ready. I didn't think about that before I started telling that joke, but I'm not wearing pants and I'm not ready. Oh, Georgia's another place that instituted a stay-at-home ban. The governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, declared a shelter-in-place order. And he explained the reason that he didn't do it sooner is because he just found out that asymptomatic people can spread the virus. Yes, that's what he says. He says he just found out that people who don't show any symptoms can also spread coronavirus. He just found that out. Yeah, and that's something that has been known widely for months. Yeah, how can a governor be so far behind the curve? A governor. Well, I just picture him now, watching season 3 of Westworld, like, guys, I'm starting to think that some of these people might be robots. I don't know. Something about them. But let's move on. Because earlier today, I talked to someone who, unlike the governor of Georgia, actually does know a lot about the coronavirus, Mr. Bill Gates. So check it out. Bill Gates, welcome to the Daily Social Distancing Show.
It's great to be on.
Let's jump straight into the first question that everybody would want me to ask. You delivered a TED Talk where you predicted pretty much what is happening now. Now, thanks to the world we live in, that has sprouted a bunch of conspiracy theories, everything from Bill Gates invented this virus to prove himself right, or he knew it was going to happen and that's why he said it. Was that TED Talk about this virus, or was that a hypothetical that has now come true?
Well, I didn't know specifically that it'd be coronavirus and that it would hit in late 2019. But the goal of the talk was to encourage governments to make the investments so we could respond very quickly and keep the case numbers very, very low. And so sadly, this is not a case where, I feel like, hey, I told you so. Because we didn't use that time when it was clear as the biggest threat to kill millions of people to have the diagnostic standing by, to be ready to ramp up a vaccine factory. A few things were done. Some countries, our foundation funded some work that will help with the vaccines now, will help with the diagnostics, but most of what was called for, particularly in a New England Journal of Medicine article I did that went into way more specifics than I could in a short TED Talk, those things didn't get done, and so that's why it's taking us a long time to get our act together faced with this threat.
Here's a question I have as an individual. How is it that you, as a non-government, knew this information and knew that it needed to be acted on, and governments and organizations that are specifically tasked with protecting people from this very thing either didn't have the information or ignored it? What do you think happened there? Because I know you interact with governments, you talk to organizations like the CDC, like the WHO. What went wrong?
Well, there are lots of individuals who were as worried as I was. People like Dr. Fauci, who've been through various epidemics. And so when we had Ebola, Zika, SARS, MERS, we were lucky that they didn't transmit very easily. They weren't these respiratory viruses where somebody who's not very symptomatic and is still walking around can spread the disease in some cases to literally dozens of people. So the respiratory transmission, particularly because world travel is so intense. That's where I show the simulation in that speech and say, this keeps me up at night more than even war, which is no small thing. And yet, in terms of being systematic about, okay, let's run a simulation and see how would we reach out to the private sector for tests or ventilators, and what kind of quarantine would we do? And as we enter into this, we haven't practiced at all. And so you can see it's, every state is being forced to figure things out on their own. And it's very ad hoc. It's not like when a war comes and we've done, 20 simulations of various types of threats, and we've made sure that the training, communications, logistics, all those pieces fall into place very rapidly.
You are in an interesting position where, in many ways, you are an expert on this topic because of the work that you now do in philanthropy. Your goal has been to eradicate malaria across the globe, focusing in Africa. You work with infectious disease, you work with experts in and around infectious disease. When you look at the coronavirus as it stands now, it's happened, leaders acted late, but what do you think needs to be done going forward? You wrote an interesting op-ed about this, but what do you think we need to do from the ground up, from the people to the leaders to the private sector?
Well, the main tools we have right now are the behavioral change, the social distancing, which often means staying at home most of the time, and the testing capacity to identify who in particular needs to get isolated, and then testing their contacts to make sure that we can catch it so early that a lot of people who get sick don't infect anyone else. Now, so our foundation is engaged in projecting what's going to go on, the modeling. Our partner IHME is, telling each state what they should think about in terms of ventilators and capacity. Further on out, the work we're doing now to find a therapeutic, a drug to reduce the disease, to cut the deaths down, we're hopeful that even in 6 months, some of those will have been approved. But the ultimate solution, the only thing that really lets us go back completely to normal and feel good about sitting in a stadium with lots of other people, is to create a vaccine and not just take care of our country, but take that vaccine out to the global population, and so that we have vast immunity, and this thing, no matter what, isn't going to spread in large numbers.
You have a unique vantage point in that you have been communicating with various governments around the world in and around their COVID-19 response, what they plan to do and what they haven't done thus far. Which countries do you think we should be looking to for models that work, and can we apply those models to a larger country like the United States? So, many people say Italy and Korea, yes, have their numbers, but they can't necessarily be applied to America. Is that true or not? Or is there a model that does seem to work and should be followed for everybody?
Well, countries have differences. South Korea did get a medium-sized infection, but then they used testing, enforced quarantine, contact tracing, and really bent the curve, even though it looked pretty scary there for a while. The epidemic in the United States is more widespread than it ever got in South Korea. So we're like the part of China, Hubei province, where a lot of the cases were in one city, Wuhan. And the US and China are different. The lockdowns that we do won't be as strictly enforced, but they are very, very important. The way we do contact tracing won't be as invasive, and so won't be quite as perfect. But it is very good news that China, although they're maintaining a lot of measures, they are not seeing a rebound. They're not seeing cases coming back, even though they are sending people back to the factories and sending people back to schools. And so thank goodness, if we're seeing a big rebound there, the idea you could keep it under control would, once you have a large number of cases like the US does and many countries in Europe, then it would seem almost impossible. So it can be done. China ended up with 0.01% of their population infected. Our goal is to stay so it's only a few percent, so at least the medical penalty isn't gigantic, even though the economic penalty will be very large.
When you look at that balance between the economic penalty and the human penalty, there are some who have argued that the economic penalty will over time equal the human penalty. Now, you are one of the few people in the world where you actually have enough money to tell us about whether or not an economy shifting in this way or another way is going to cause mass deaths. But how do you think we should be looking at this? Because yes, there is an economy and yes, there is human life, but where do you think the truth lies?
Well, there isn't a choice where you get to say to people, don't pay attention to this epidemic. Most people, they have older relatives, they're worried about getting sick. The idea of a normal economy is not there as a choice. About 80% of people are going to change their activities. If you get the other 20% to go along with that nationwide, then the disease numbers will flatten, hopefully in the next month, and start to go down, hopefully in the month after that. And then when they've gone down a lot, then in a tasteful way, using prioritized testing, you can start to reopen a lot of things like schools and work. Probably not sports events because the chance of mass spread there is quite large. Mm-hmm. And so to get back economically, taking the pain extremely now and telling those who wouldn't curb their activities, no, you must go along with the rest of society and not associate in a way that we have exponential increase in these cases, that is the right thing, even though it's extremely painful. It's unheard of, and there are particular businesses that it's catastrophic for. Mm-hmm. That's the only way you get so you can feel like you can say to the entire population, ideally in the early summer if things go well, yes, now please do resume, and we are, through testing, making sure that it won't spread in some very, very big way. So people will need the confidence that the system is working and smart people are making decisions, and over-optimistic statements actually work against that.
What do you think most people are missing right now? Because everyone has an opinion, everyone from my mom to my friends to people online, everyone has an opinion on coronavirus because we have very few centralized sources that people trust. But what do you think people are missing about this virus and this moment and what we need to be doing as people? Because we know the basics: wash your hands, stay at home, stay away from other people, try to maintain a world where people are moving as little as possible. But what do you think we're missing that people might make a mistake and exacerbate what we're going through now?
Well, the thing that needs to get fixed in the next few weeks is to prioritize our testing capacity, which is going up, but making sure the right people are being tested. That will guide us in a very deep way.
And who are the right people?
If you're symptomatic or somebody you've been in close contact with tested positive, those are the broad categories. Of course, in the front of the line, you have health workers or essential workers who have to go, keep the food supply, the medical system, water, electricity, internet, keep those things running for the people who are mostly at home. But that doesn't use up that higher percentage of the testing capacity. We have a lot of people without symptoms who are just kind of worried, and there we need to show them that until our capacity goes up a lot, they are going to have to wait. The worst thing we have is that if it takes you longer than 24 hours to get the test result, then you don't know, you haven't been told during the very key period where you're most infectious to take extreme measures. And so we've got to get not just the numbers up, that that confuses people. It's the speed of the results. South Korea was giving those results in less than 24 hours.
So if we have tests that are ramping up around the world, we're going to see the numbers going up. Now, some have said that number and the mortality rate or fatality rate can be deceptive because there are so many who aren't getting tested and are recovering, and so we don't really know how dangerous or how fatal this disease actually is. What is needed in the realm of testing? Like what I'm trying to say is, I understand that you want to get as many tests as possible, but once we've tested as many people as we have tested, what are we trying to get to as an end goal?
Well, for rich countries that do the right policies, you should be able to plateau and get the cases down with less than a few percent of the population infected. China, South Korea, there are countries that absolutely have achieved that. And that means that your total deaths is actually not gigantic. Now, in developing countries, the ability to do lots of testing, to have the patients who have severe respiratory distress get treatment, and do this social isolation, for developing countries, it's far harder. And so, will these measures actually stop it from getting to a large part of the population? Places like India and Nigeria. I was talking to President Ramaphosa today, who's not only president of South Africa, he's the head of the African Union, and he's a very strong voice encouraging the countries there to act quickly when the number of cases is still fairly low, which is true throughout sub-Saharan Africa right now.
When you look at where we are now, the one thing that we can't deny is everybody has dealt with the coronavirus on a different timeline. Not just across the globe. I mean, even within the United States, you have states like Georgia and Florida that have just implemented stay-at-home orders. You have many other states that haven't done it at all. Is this going to fundamentally undermine the efforts of other states and other countries that have shut themselves down? Because if the numbers dip in one country and another country hasn't had the same amount of shutdowns or people self-quarantining, for instance, if people from Brazil travel after this, or if people from, whether it's Belarus or Hungary or any other country where a leader hasn't taken it seriously, will that not undermine the effort completely? Is there a point to doing this when everybody isn't doing it?
Well, sadly, at some level of wealth, there'll be countries that no matter how hard they try, they will have a widespread epidemic. And so, again, sadly, the richer countries that do contain the epidemic will not allow people from those countries to come in, unless they are quarantined or tested or prove they're immune. And so this is going to stop people going across borders very dramatically these next few years till we get to that full vaccination. Within the United States is different because we're not going to partition the country. And so therefore, we are all in it together. We can't do what we're going to do with foreign nationals, which is reduce the numbers a lot and have very strict screening there. We're not going to have at every state border, some complex quarantine center. And so the whole country needs, even when you have small numbers, because those can exponentiate to big numbers so quickly, the doubling time is like 3 days when you're still behaving in the pre-epidemic way. So each country, has to get the entire populace, even some who initially resisted, maybe for very good reasons, because the economic effect on them is strong. So this is powerful medicine, but if you take a big dose of it earlier, you don't have to take it for nearly as long.
You were one of the first people to come out and donate a large chunk of money to fighting coronavirus or helping medical workers get the equipment they need. I remember the last I read it was yourself and your wife Melinda who had pledged over $100 million. It seems though that money isn't able to fix this problem. It seems like governments around the world are trying everything they can, but it doesn't seem like it can be fixed. What are you hoping to achieve in this moment in time?
Well, if we get the right testing capacity, you can change by literally millions the number who are infected. And governments will eventually come up with lots of money for these things, but they don't know where to direct it. They can't move as quickly. And so because our foundation has such deep expertise in infectious diseases, we've thought about the epidemic. We did fund some things to be more prepared, like a vaccine effort. Our early money can accelerate things. So for example, there's, of all the vaccine constructs, the 7 most promising of those, even though we'll end up picking at most 2 of them, we're going to fund factories for all 7. And just so that we don't waste time in serially saying, okay, which vaccine works, and then building the factory. Because to get to the best case that people like myself and Dr. Fauci are saying is about 18 months, we need to do safety and efficacy and build manufacturing, and they're different for the different constructs. And so we'll abandon, it'll be a few $billion we'll waste on manufacturing for the constructs that don't get picked because something else is better. But a few billion in the situation we're in, where there's trillions of dollars, that's 1,000 times more, trillions of dollars being lost economically, it is worth it. And normal government procurement processes and understanding which are the right 7, in a few months those may kick in. But our foundation, we can get that bootstrapped and get it going and save months because every month counts. Things can reopen if we do the right things in the summer, but it won't be completely normal. You'll still be very worried. We may decide masks are important, although right now they're in short supply for health workers, so people should not go and hoard those. But the capacity of that can be brought up, so it may be something that, like China today, everybody who's walking around is wearing one of those. So we'll have a lot of unusual measures until we get the world vaccinated. 7 billion people, that's a tall order, but it is where we need to get to, despite a lot of things in between now and then to minimize the damage.
You predicted this pandemic almost to a T, and maybe it was because we were dealing with other things at the time, we didn't really pay that much attention. Is there anything else you want to warn us about now that we should be looking forward to? Is there anything else that keeps you up at night?
Well, this is a naturally caused epidemic, and as bad as it is, it looks, if you have reasonable treatment, to have a 1% fatality. There could be epidemics that are worse than that, including ones that aren't naturally caused, that are a form of bioterrorism. But one thing I feel good about is this is such a big change to the world that this time it won't be like Ebola, which was just there in West Africa or Central Africa. This time, the tens of billions to have the diagnostic standing by, the vaccine manufacturing standing by, this time we will get ready for the next epidemic.
Well, I hope your words are prophetic once again. Thank you so much for your time. Good luck in all of your work, and stay healthy out there. We need you.
Hey, thanks, Trevor.
Hopefully we'll be playing tennis again soon.
You bet. Looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Bill Gates. And by the way, I texted you my Venmo account. When we come back, we have an exclusive look at the first movie that's being made about the coronavirus. And spoiler alert, it might involve you. Don't go away. Welcome back to the Daily Social Distancing Show. Look, people, we've all been quarantined for about 3 weeks now, and let's be honest, it sucks. But the good news is, it works. Countries that have imposed strict social distancing have started seeing their transmission rates drop. And it looks like it's even working here in New York. So that means every single one of us who's staying at home right now is a hero. And you know what happens to heroes? they make movies about them.
Some heroes are called to the battlefield. Some heroes to the sky. When the world is at war,
Breaking overnight at war amid a dramatic increase in coronavirus cases.
The world is at war with a hidden enemy.
A silent army of infection.
The war against coronavirus. America at war.
one hero will put on the uniform and answer the call of duty by staying at home. The fight will not be easy. Supplies will be thin. But when the only way to destroy the enemy is through self-isolation, doing nothing means everything.
Man, I can't wait to watch that in theaters when they reopen in 2024. Well, that's our show for today. Before we go, we want to keep reminding you that doctors and nurses out there need your help to get the protective gear that they need. So please, go to Thrive Global's First Responders First and donate whatever you can to get PPE to the people saving our lives right now. And if you want to help in New York City specifically, you can go to the New York Mayor's Fund COVID-19 response and you can donate there. Stay safe out there. Wash your hands. Watch Tiger King backwards because then it's an even crazier show. And I'll see you again next week. Now here it is, your moment of Zen.
You came to me in a dream. You had on a very interesting ballet outfit and you were dancing in the dream. And you were waving a wand and saying, I wish I could wave my wand and make this go away. And then you spun around and you danced away.
Well, that's there's a lot of metaphoric reality in that one. I thank you for sharing that with us. It was kind of you.